Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of the Big 12 Huddle. I am one of your two co-hosts here. I am Cal at the CGA Tour, the Oklahoma State affiliate for the Big 12 and the College Huddle. And I'm joined, as always, here by my co-host, Night Bengal, or at the Knighted Ones, the UCF podcast as part of the affiliate program for the Big 12 Huddle and the College Huddle. But also, first name is Roger. So, Roger, how are you doing tonight? How's it going?
I'm doing great. Looks like we're back on the proverbial horse again. Last week we kind of screwed up the intro, but you did an amazing job this week. So hats off, Cal.
Thanks so much. No, I really appreciate it. I also have an intro video I keep meaning to put together of going to the Big 12 Championship, recording a video for the intro from the field, and talking about that Arizona State incredible college football win over Iowa State. But it did rob us of seeing the Heisman Trophy winner in the Big 12 Championship, which is what I want to get to here in Travis Hunter. And I really am amazed Travis Hunter won the Heisman. Do you think he should have won the Heisman? I almost think I know what you're going to say. So we didn't really talk about this going into the final couple weeks of the season. It was like, yeah, okay, I think he's going to win it. All right, moving on.
Look, the way I look at it is good for the Big 12, good for Colorado. I don't know, man. I could make a case for him for sure. Like that's one of those that I'm not mad at, right? So anytime you get someone, it reminds me a lot of Dion, that can play both sides of the field as well as he does. I don't think you can really give it to anybody else.
I don't either, to be honest. There's quite a few times where I've thought, Ashton Genty, like maybe he should be winning it, or Cam Ward, or somebody else, and it shouldn't be a guy who got his team to 8-4, right? I mean, just so many times we see Marcus Mariota or Jameis Winston, or just one of those guys win it who has 10 wins on the season.
I hate that though. I don't like the fact that your team has to be, world beaters or within the playoff or whatever else to be considered for Heisman, because you've got a lot of really, really good players that do special things. For example, we talk about the All-American list, right? Cam Scadaboo made it, right? He had worse numbers than RJ Harvey by far. In fact, RJ Harvey was third team All-American, but he should have been, just based on numbers alone with everybody else, he should have been second or third. So he got hosed, and he's been doing it year after year, and he got hosed by being on this really underperforming relative to expectations UCF team this past year. So I don't, when it comes to Heisman, you give it's the most outstanding player, not most outstanding team award. And I know that when you look at it holistically for college football, what they're looking at is, okay, we want to highlight people that are going to be playing in the playoff so that it gives us the ability to, promote the playoff a little bit more. So I get it. I get it from that perspective. But to me, Heisman should be about the best player on the field. I don't care if they're 8-4. I don't care if they're 4-6. I don't care if they're, 10-0. I mean, if there's someone that stands out above everybody else, then I think they should win. So from that perspective, I hate that take. And a lot of the writers have, let's be real, the writers who are voting on this and the people that are voting on this, they're not watching all of these guys at all.
No.
They're looking at some stats and then saying, okay, who's on a winning team and who's going to make the most noise? Okay, let's circle that box, right? So I don't care what, I don't care as long as that player is performing against reasonable competition or, equivalent competition to the other players. I'm fine with that. And I think Travis Hunter, there's so few players out there that can do what he does on both sides of the field. I don't think there's anything wrong, nor should there be, or should it be questioned or looked down upon about him winning the Heisman.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And most years, I'd say this would be more of a competition with the quarterback on the best team. And then we'd be talking about some other couple of guys. For example, Chase Young was in the Heisman Trophy ceremony not too long ago, and he's a defensive end, right? But did they try to throw him a pass in the end zone? Kind of the cute deal like the Texans did a while back with J.J. Watt trying to get in the NFL MVP. And this year, Cam Ward, his team lost 2 games. He still was the quarterback representative for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And then the other quarterbacks that could or should have or would have been there, Dylan Gabriel he's plays for an undefeated team, Oregon, and they're killing it. But he seems much more of like a system fit guy in that it doesn't seem necessarily that he is the best player on Oregon. And if they had no one else there, or if they had somebody else instead of him, they wouldn't be still winning 10 plus games. It seems like, okay, you know what? Maybe they win 11 instead of 12. But then again, that Ohio State team didn't look that tough at the end of the year when they had 2 losses. So it just is Dylan Gabriel. How much did he overcome? And then you start moving down the list here, and you're like, Carson Beck. Well, no. I mean, he didn't play like a Heisman Trophy guy. Quinn Ewers, no, he didn't play enough games, nor did he play like a Heisman Trophy guy. And you can just keep working your way down the list and go, all right, well, there's just not a quarterback that would compete. And then you talk about how much of an incredible athlete, an incredible accomplishment it is to win the college football best corner award and the best wide receiver award as the same person and play 140 plus snaps a game. Now, I also want to add here, I think the Heisman Trophy being awarded to Travis Hunter will mean a lot more, actually, comparatively in how he does in the NFL. If it's like, oh, he was playing in the Big 12, he just was able to put up some stats because they throw the ball over the place and, yada, yada, the whole media narrative of the Big 12 still being a huge scoring league. And some games are really high scoring, but there's plenty that aren't. And that still being the idea. Then, okay, if Travis Hunter doesn't play both sides of the NFL at all, I'm saying he just strictly one or the other, then it'll be like, well, I mean, maybe was it a gimmick or was it not? And I just right now it's fresh in my mind. There's no gimmick. There's no way it's a gimmick. He was incredible. He won both of the awards from college football for being the best at each position. It's just
Well, I mean, the thing in the NFL, though, I think that you're not going to get I don't think that's going to take away from him because he's not going to be able, nobody's going to pay him to be on the field on both sides of the ball. One, the wear and tear of the NFL. 2, you think about the amount of money they're paying these guys. They're not going to put him on for both sides of the ball. It's whatever their fit or what their need is going to be. Now, is there a situation where he plays defensive back for one team because they want him as a defensive back and a wide receiver for the other team? Potentially. The other thing you have to look at with Travis Hunter as far as how it pertains to the NFL is his measurables. How does he stack up in each one of those position groups, right? And then the other part of it is what is the team's need, right? So do they need, is there a real need at wide receiver for them, or is there a real need for, a defensive back? And that's going to dictate a lot. He's only 6'1". So that tells me he's probably going to be a defensive back in the NFL, but he's also only 185 pounds. So, it's going to be interesting. Actually, he's a football star. He's from Sewanee, Georgia, which I'm very familiar with. I travel there quite often. And they produce a lot of really good football players there, but 6'1", unless he's going to play slot receiver or something, it's going to be really hard for him to be a wideout or anybody that's going to be a wideout. I think if anything, he projects to a slot receiver, and I don't think a lot of NFL teams are going to pay him for that. And I don't think a lot of NFL teams are going to do that. I mean, the slot receivers that are successful by and large are in systems too. Think about the New England Patriots. They had Wes Welker and then, et cetera. And they just slotted in another receiver there. Well, a certain receiver who has a pretty popular podcast right now, right? So at the end of the day, I think he's going to project to a defensive back, and a team is going to take him as a defensive back and they won't put him out on wide receiver. They will probably put him on special teams, though, either as a gunner or something like that. So he'll probably have a special teams role because of his speed, and he'll be I think he's going to be a project as a defensive back.
Well, I really wanted him. I want him to try it at the next level. I don't know if that makes sense at all, like what you're saying for him to do. I mean, after his rookie contract is over, you're right. He should be taking up 2 spots with salary if he's playing both positions. But I'm sure a team is not looking at it that way whatsoever. They're going, hey, you know what? We'll throw him out here for a couple plays a game at wide receiver, but he's really a corner. And it'd just be fun to see, honestly, and see how he does in the NFL if he can still handle it. But I just don't think there's any way, like you're saying as well, too, here. Now, Colorado does play here a little bit later on in the season in a bowl game and actually play a Big 12 foe, weirdly enough. And it's in the Alamo Bowl. So there's a bunch of other bowl games here that I'll also ask you about here and kind of get to. But this one's on December 28th. It's not the first Big 12 game to take place, but it is the one that's front of mind here. And I think it's going to be the most fun matchup. I just think a lot of the starters will play for both teams. What do you think? Colorado, BYU, Alamo Bowl. Who you got?
Honestly, I think BYU. And this is why I'll say BYU. I think BYU has a solid running game and they have a solid defense and they've got time to rest and recover. And their quarterback's finally starting to come out of his shell a little bit towards the end of the season. So from that perspective, I'm going to say BYU. I'm not familiar of who's opting out, who's opting in, and which games and what. So I can't speak to that. But if I was looking at the rosters at the end of the season, I would pick BYU over Colorado in this particular instance for that reason.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I just think at the end of the day, Colorado is going to have a lot of players who are always transferring in, transferring out, just with the whole Dion factor. He's able to recruit some guys and also able to really, frankly, tell some guys that, hey, he's recruiting other guys to take their spots. So I just think the speculation here in my eyes is that there are enough Colorado guys who will not be playing, more BYU guys who will be playing. That's who I'd take. Now, the very first game that kicks off for the Big 12, for a Big 12 team to play, here, has already happened. It was actually West Virginia last night. They lost to Memphis. So,
yeah,
RIP. That was a bizarre end of the game as well, too, here.
Yeah, the fumble, not fumble game.
Yeah, and then the other game that has Big 12 implications here, of course, is Texas Clemson here. That's being played Saturday. And that'll be an interesting matchup just because whoever wins plays Arizona State. But for the actual matchups, we know for sure. K-State plays Rutgers here just day after Christmas here, a week from today. I was recording this on Thursday night. I'm taking K-State. I just think it's weird that that Avery Johnson didn't just blossom into like the best quarterback in the Big 12. Of course, I saw him play against Oklahoma State and watched him the weeks leading up to that, where he played Utah beforehand. And then, of course, he played non-conference Arizona, which all three of those teams finished one of the worst as like the bottom of the Big 12. But I'm a little weirded out that Avery Johnson just played much better. But then again, who knows? I'm not real high on Rutgers for a lot of reasons, but basically it's like history. I just don't know.
Dude, they were 4-5 in the Big 10 and 7-5.
So now I feel a lot better saying that. Yeah. I mean, K-State was 8-4. So
I just, to me, when you look at Rutgers, they played Howard, beat them 44-7. They beat Akron 49-17. They beat Virginia Tech 26-23, a Virginia Tech team that wasn't great. They beat a Washington team 21-18. Nebraska beat them 14-7. Wisconsin whooped them 42-7. UCLA beat them 35-32. USC beat them 42-20. They beat Minnesota 26-19. They beat Maryland 31-17, and Illinois beat them 38-31. And Rutgers beat Michigan State 41-14. Their wins don't give me a whole lot of confidence, and their losses were pretty bad. So, for me, having watched K-State this year, I kind of told you towards the beginning and middle part of the season that was a team that played dangerously because they had a pretty solid defense, but they played a lot of close games. And I think in this situation, it'll help them. Avery Johnson started, he kind of hit fits and starts towards the middle and the last quarter of the season. He was playing well, and then they kind of fell apart a little bit. He had turnovers. And with a team like K-State, when your defense is doing enough to keep you in it or to win the game, but not to make mistakes, it's going to be tight. But I don't see this Rutgers team being as competitive in this game as K-State.
Yeah, I don't see it either. And after you said all that, I mean, there's no way I'd pick against K-State at that point. So that seals it for me. The next one here, I guess, is just jumped into it. The Liberty Bowl takes place December 27th, but Texas Tech versus Arkansas.
That one might be more interesting.
I think a little tail and green might show out for Arkansas and give Texas Tech some trouble. It's still odd to me that Texas Tech beat both Iowa State and Arizona State, but then there's the season 8-4. But nonetheless, I think Arkansas. I don't want to pick against the Big 12 on purpose, but of course I just want to say what I believe, and that's Arkansas will win.
Yeah, Arkansas has a pretty good offense. They're fairly decent and put up some good points. They played you. I think they played you guys this year, didn't they? And lost 39-31.
Yeah, they lost when we were still flying high, 39-31 in double overtime. It's one of the weirdest games I've ever seen. If you look at the whole entire of that ESPN predictor of like the graph of who's winning and at what points in the games, is it like 99%? I'm pretty darn sure it gets like 99.9% for Arkansas at one point, and we still win the game somehow. It just is a bizarre game overall. Double OT, 30, winning by 8. It just, no one's drawn that one up in their head.
Arkansas is a little fickle, right? So like they beat Mississippi State, which Mississippi State isn't a great team this year, right? Or good team this year for 58-25. They still put up 31 points against Ole Miss, but get boat raced. They're 63-31. They play Texas and lose 20-10. And they play LA Tech. Who cares? They play Missouri and lose by a touchdown. So close game. So this team could put up points, and they have fairly good defense. They're a 6-6 team. And, we talk about SEC teams. The good teams they lost against, but they didn't lose by a lot. And Texas Tech has a good offense, but their defense was not great this year. So,
and Arkansas beat Tennessee. Like just what a wild win.
19-14.
But yeah, you hold Tennessee and their offense, and I mean, depending on what ranking you want to go off of or whatever, but they're playing in the playoffs. They beat a playoff team, and they're 6-6 on the season. Seems crazy. So,
yeah, I'm not liking Texas Tech's chances here personally. Any solid teams they haven't performed as well against. They've got a good offense, but they don't have a defense to speak of. So, to me, I think Texas Tech, unfortunately for the Red Raider Nation, will not be throwing victory tortillas on the field in the bowl game.
I don't think so either. And one of the teams, weirdly enough, that Texas Tech lost to earlier this year was to TCU, who's playing in the next game here against Louisiana, which, the Raging Cajuns have played football, but I don't know much about them, to be honest here. So I'm looking it up here.
They weren't
10-3 overall.
They weren't supposed to play in this game.
And that's right. Who opted out again?
I think it was Marshall. Because of their coaching situation and opt-outs. They lost like 20 some players to the portal. So I'm pretty sure Louisiana stepped in for them for that bowl commitment.
That was Louisiana Tech, actually, that stepped in to face Army.
Or Louisiana.
In the Independence Bowl. So,
boy, did I really screw that one up. Sorry, guys.
No, all good, dear. But yeah, Marshall opted out of the Independence Bowl. Too many players from the transfer portal, and Louisiana Tech's playing Army, but still Louisiana. So, you're right on the money here with the name of the school. The other school had just a different ending than this one.
Well, if any of the Louisiana fans are actually listening to us right now, they hate my guts because they hate each other. ULL and they absolutely despise each other. That's why they can't be in the same conference together. Louisiana Tech and Louisiana Lafayette. So
makes a ton of sense. Going back to it a little bit here, Louisiana, they were 7-1 in conference, 10-3 overall. I mean, they're going up against a team here that barely above 500 in TCU. They finished the season 7-5, and Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Their wins are against teams that, of course, I've heard of before because they won 10 games. I mean, they beat Wake Forest, App State, Coastal Carolina. I mean, they lost to Marshall pretty badly. There's not a ton of teams here on this list that I'm like, oh, they're powerhouses or anything whatsoever. So their wins could be completely empty. But their losses here, they lost to Tulane, 41-33. They lose to South Alabama by 2, 24-22. And then they lost to Marshall 31-3. So I'm going to say, you know what? TCU just has the better talent, and I'm going to guess a lot of Raging Cajuns are in the portal. If the players that are good enough to go are going up, so they're going in the portal already, and the TCU guys just, no matter what, they have depth, is what I'd say. That's where I run it. And TCU, actually, they were 8-4 this year, so they finished with a much better record than I had initially thought. And I mean, TCU beat some good teams in the Big 12. They did chalk up their wins. Some of them were against just the bottom dwellers of the Big 12 here in Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma State. But they also beat Cincinnati, finished with a 5-7 record. Grand, not great. But they beat Texas Tech. They beat KU, who almost made it to a bowl game but didn't. And they beat Stanford, who was not good at all. But this is really going to be an interesting matchup of who are you today? Because I don't think TCU proved to be consistent at all this season to be good or bad. I just think they were 500 at the end of the season. Or they're 8-4, but weirdly enough, they were 8-4.
I think this is a TCU team that will out-talent the Louisiana team. And I hate to say that because, being a recent promotion from G5 leagues, a 10-3 is nothing to sniff at. But the teams that we're talking about on here, both from a records perspective and who they are, it's not the same teams that we were playing when we were winning. So, just looking at the records of the teams that they beat and that beat them, like Southern Alabama or South Alabama, they should not have beat the Raging Cajuns. So I'm gonna stay with TCU just simply because of that, and that may be P5 snobbery, but it's not to me because I'm really looking at it as who are the opponents that they played, how did they perform this year, and against a TCU team that was kind of resurgent.
Great point. The only thing I could add here is that I think TCU wins as well. And is that the Iowa State Cyclones, the other team that was 10-3, like the Raging Cajuns, but of course in the Big 12, it's much different. And Iowa State here, who I'd say Big 12 championship, can I say got boat raced because they lost 45-19. I still can't believe that third quarter score of just an absolute powerhouse here of Arizona State scoring 21 in the third quarter of the Big 12 championship is still insane. But Iowa State here plays Miami, and Cam Ward, Heisman Trophy guy, who we just talked about a couple minutes ago, and ESPN's prediction, I don't think it matters for much at all whatsoever, but it's Miami at 69%. But the betting odds, so I'm getting too much quicker here, is Miami -3. And I've seen it, and it opened apparently Iowa State -2.5. So quite a big swing here in the odds. Looks like Cam Ward's going to play.
Yeah, I mean, if Cam Ward plays, I don't see Iowa State winning this game. I hate to say that way. And I'll say that because, they did lose to Syracuse 42-38. But Iowa State has been kind of on a downswing. And like I told you, the big matchup to watch here is Iowa State's ability to turn over Cam Ward, because Cam Ward will throw picks if he takes chances, right? And Iowa State's defense is predicated on getting turnovers. So I think that's the matchup to watch there. But I kind of want to bet on Miami on this one, just simply because Iowa State is so finicky. And like I've said all season, they're good on defense, they're good on offense, but they're not great on either. So I think that I bet on Cam Ward's arm, unfortunately, with the U winning. So that's my prediction on this one.
Yeah, I sadly think Miami wins as well too, just because I'd much rather the Big 12 team win. But after watching that Big 12 championship, I have no faith at all in Iowa State being able to stop anyone that can run the football. And Miami, they're probably not the best running football team in their own conference, even whatsoever. But rushing the football, they've got an 800-yard rusher on the season in Damian Martinez. They've got several other running backs. They're extremely skilled as a program overall. It's not a matchup in my mind of talent versus talent. It's actually just there's a lot of talent with Miami, and there's a lot of great coaching with Iowa State. And at the end of the day, which of those is going to win out? Is Matt Campbell really going to win out, or is Cam Ward and his elite athleticism and skills going to bail him out talent wise, where he just doesn't make it? He doesn't make as many mistakes as he would if they need to lose. So, and there's a better way to say that here, but I just think he probably doesn't make that many mistakes. And Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver here for Miami's been definitely a high draft prospect here as well too. That's why I know his name. And so it's one of those things where I think end of the day, probably Miami. So the other one here that we could just talk about is the Texas Bowl, which is actually the last Big 12 matchup here. And that's LSU versus Baylor. I just real quickly here can just say I think Baylor loses because LSU's Garrett, I forget, Messmeyer is coming back. And I think LSU's defense is pretty good. And Baylor beat us, but it wasn't in convincing fashion when they beat Oklahoma State earlier this year. So if I'm taking the straw poll here and going, what do I know against what have I seen? That's kind of why I would take LSU. I've just seen them play pretty darn good football. Granted, their loss to Alabama was just truly an incredible thrashing by Alabama, and Alabama didn't make the college football playoff and lost 3 games this season. So that's kind of tough. But still, I think LSU's better than Baylor at the end of the day.
Well, I think the quarterback is the key there, right? So the question is is he back in the groove of things or is he not? Do you know what the injury was that he went out for?
Yeah, I'm looking that up right now. Actually, as we say that we're talking about the Baylor quarterback or the LSU quarterback?
LSU quarterback.
Yeah, Garrett Nussmeier here. Latest updates is that he yeah, I mean it's that he's going to play. So let's see here. Trying to find a news article about him though recently, but yeah, apparently he's supposed to play. Let's play in the bowl game. So it seems kind of odd, but I guess maybe it's not that odd. I don't know. I mean it's not odd at all because he's coming back next year, and of course, why wouldn't you want to play then? I think yeah, his injury's not talked about whatsoever, and yeah, basically he's coming back, gonna play the bowl game. So, oh wait, hang on a second though. Apparently, 50 minutes ago, the Fox 61 says the entire LSU offense sitting out against Baylor in the Texas Bowl.
What?
That seems odd, but this is from a Baylor podcast. I don't necessarily know. It's not that I don't want to believe it. It seems such an odd thing to happen. I don't believe that really at all. Yeah, in the day, it looks
the
like
entire offense for LSU is going to sit
some-
out in a bowl
there's,
game.
There's no way that Baylor podcast.
There's too many
got me.
NIL deals with kickers for bowl wins and bowl participation. So I don't believe that at all.
They got the click out of me. I'll give them credit on that one because they got my click. But end of the day, yeah, Garrett Nussmeier's plan, and no other reason to think anything differently here. Besides some random Baylor podcast article click. So yeah, I taking LSU at the end of the day. Then,
Okay.
you?
I think Baylor's better than we think. They've kind of been building. LSU's kind of based on their record and some of the wins that they have and some of the wins that they don't have. I'm not sure.
Well,
I mean,
some more info. This game opened at an even spread, and now it's Baylor -1.
I mean, the offensive tackle, their offensive tackle, which is the number 7th ranked overall by Bleacher Report, is not playing. So they've got some players missing, but I don't think their whole offensive line would sit out of that. There's just no way. So I don't know. I'm gonna, I've picked Baylor a few times when you haven't this year and come out on top. They just seem like a team that's finding ways to win and is learning to win. So I'm just gonna just to shake it up a little bit. I'm gonna go with Baylor on this one.
Yeah, I think most people are saying it's a toss-up, so maybe I should be backing off my LSU take a little bit here. I don't know. Baylor just didn't surprise me in any way or any game this year, and play. I just don't think they played above their level, but they may not need to win games. I mean, they beat Texas Tech in convincing fashion. They beat TCU by 3. They won their last 7 games in a row to end out the season here for Baylor. Excuse me, 6 games in a row. And then in the non-con, they've got to win over Tarleton State, which whatever. But they also beat Air Force, who is another FBS opponent, I guess. That's what I'd say on that. They lost to Utah in the second game of the season, which was that's the game, of course, that Cam Rising got injured in, which was a weird one. But end out the season, they ended out strong with 6 wins in a row. So maybe I should be taking Baylor here. Then lastly here tonight on the podcast, I want to talk to you about the Big 12 basketball here, and the season has not yet started. Conference play doesn't start until actually last week of December. December 30th is Oklahoma State's first game against Houston, where we host Houston, and I hope we will not be listed on ESPN's last of their basketball ranking power index after the Houston game, but probably will. And right now, as it stands here, it's been an interesting Big 12 season. What have you, or Big 12 basketball, preseason, I guess, what have you taken away from it so far? Any surprising kind of things or record-wise after everyone's through 10 games?
I mean, for me, Cincinnati's the big surprise. They had taken a step back after they lost Cronin to the West Coast and hadn't really recovered. They hadn't. I mean, they played decent, middle of the pack kind of team, and they were 8-1 right now and sitting in second place in the conference. On top of that, Arizona is a big surprise to me. They are not playing well. They're 5-5 right now. There was a lot of expectations around Arizona, and it has not panned out for them. Houston being at 6-4 is also a bit of a surprise for me as well. They were highly ranked coming into the season and the preseason, and I expected them to play better as well. So when you're talking about surprises, I'm guessing for me is some of the losses that some of the teams have taken, Kansas being one of them. One of their losses I was not expecting, but bigger surprises, I think, is Houston for me and Arizona and Cincinnati. Those are the 3 big surprise teams for me this year.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm very much the same here. My also surprised is that through this many games, Colorado, who was picked to finish worse than Oklahoma State in the Big 12 at the end of the season, they're also 8-2. I mean, they're 7-0 at home, which is great, but yeah, I just didn't see. Colorado hasn't played too many people yet, but I mean, I really didn't think they'd be this. I just didn't think this would be their record, I guess, so far. At the end of the day, I mean, they lost to Iowa State and they've lost to UConn, but besides that, they've won every game this season. They also lost to Michigan State.
Well, they beat UConn.
Yeah, they
Colorado
beat
beat
UConn.
UConn
Excuse me. That's
73-72. Yeah.
sorry, I was reading that wrong here. Yeah, they lost to Michigan State by like 20. I mean,
It was
16. But then
72-56.
they,
Yeah.
yeah, but then they beat UConn. So that's also been the surprising deal here. Is
They
Colorado.
only lost to Mark, or wait, that was last year. I'm sorry. But last year,
Really?
remember, this was a second round tournament team.
Yeah. I mean, lost to
So
Marquette, but yeah, I mean
they weren't bad. I mean, that was the first year in a really long time that Colorado had played as well as they did. But and they haven't they beat a number 11 UConn team that has been playing really, really well. They've played a bunch of Mountain West teams. So they played Colorado State. They played well former Mountain West teams, I guess. San Diego State, because they're going to
the
they're
pack,
going the
right?
pack, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, the big thing for me is that UConn win. That was the biggest surprise for me of the season. I wasn't expecting them to beat UConn because UConn's been on a roll and ranked number 11 this year, and they beat them in a close one, 73-72.
Yeah, pretty darn impressive. And then the other, I mean, I guess the other teams in the Big 12 here that I'm like, whoa, I can't believe that happened is, I mean, it's a little weird to say, but like, I'm actually surprised that I just didn't know that much about UCF coming into the Big 12, honestly. Like, I just didn't know that much about you guys as like basketball, as a basketball school. Has UCF just been really good at hoops for a while, or is this just a recent thing here in the past 2 seasons? Because it seems like you guys are getting good recruits. We did the outline before the podcast, stuff like that, talked through some stuff, and I just couldn't believe that you guys are getting as many 5 stars in that you are, and really just you're okay letting guys transfer out because they may not have enough playing time, and then they'll transfer to another Big 12 school, Oklahoma State, and be like our leading scorer. So it just seems. Tell me more about UCF basketball in the history of the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, UCF basketball in general, basketball was, I remember we going back to Division III all the way up. Basketball was one of the primary drivers for us. We have had pretty decent basketball. We go to Conference USA, had some good runs there. The problem with UCF basketball is being in one bid leagues, right? So we were in the American, we had Memphis, we had UConn, we had Cincinnati was good with Cronin there. We had Houston was starting to resurge. SMU basketball was doing pretty well at that time. So we were always competitive. That was a much more competitive league than I think it got credit for at the time. If you think about what those teams were doing at that time, right? You had so UCF always, we have limited resources because we were a younger school. So our plan has always been put the money towards football, right? So basketball has been underfunded. We've had Johnny Dawkins. He's been there for 8 years. It's been kind of up and down with him. But last season, we had a decent team that competed in the Big 12. They did better than what we thought that they were going to do. And this year, it was time to tear it all down and start over again. We kind of started Last Chance U for basketball at UCF, right? So guys like Mikey Williams and Hendricks and Dior Johnson and, Benny Williams from Syracuse. So these are guys that were successful in their own right, or like Mikey Williams and Hendricks, Dior Johnson, young guys who either got into a little bit of trouble or didn't work out at their previous stop because there were coaching problems. And they've all kind of collected here. They've all kind of reset whatever their issues are. They've collected here and they've kind of bonded together. Sprinkle in some guys like Mustafa Chiem, who is a true 5-star and the number 1 center last year. He reclassified actually a year early to come play for us. And if you watch him, he is learning quickly and very, very talented. Not the typical 7-footer that you think, watching the floor, who's struggling to get up and down the floor. He's learning the big place. We've kind of switched to last year. We were kind of a we had a really, really good stifling defense, but we were starting to integrate the press, which led to turnovers. So we were good there, but we weren't consistent shooting. Well, this year we brought in a lot of talent, and they seem to be gelling faster than even what I expected them to be. So we've got scorers this year, and that's what we were missing last year. We're set up almost like a Houston team when they were making their runs. Combo guards, guys that could play the wing or could play guard, much better shooting, and a faster pace of basketball. And the big challenge that we have right now is consistent rebounding, but we've got a lot of speed, got a lot of turnovers, a lot of transition offense. It's a pretty solid team. So as a program, UCF has striven to be successful in whatever conference they've been. They've found success, but we've kind of been in the same conference as some heavy hitters for a while, and joining the Big East/ACC or AAC when we did, we had some pretty good basketball teams there. And obviously coming to the Big 12, we have a lot of good basketball teams here. So we've put a competitive roster together. They've done pretty well. They've got solid defense. The big thing that I'm scared of is for Big 12 basketball is going to be rebounding and making sure we can make up for being out rebounded.
Yeah, I always think of the Oklahoma State roster as being just truly undersized and like, oh my gosh, how can we ever get a rebound? So it's good to hear other teams are also thinking about that when the Hunter Dickinsons of the world are still out there. I don't know what his rebound average is for KU. I think of much more as a post-up player than a rebounder, but I think the Big 12 is a gauntlet every single night. It's just not off to the greatest season ever in Big 12 history as basketball competition goes, and the SEC is off to a little bit better of a start. They look a little bit deeper as a conference. So I've seen the Instagram reels and the TikToks and the YouTube videos, whatever, about the SEC is actually the best conference. I don't know how it'll be at the end of the season, though. I think it'll still be the Big 12 is the best conference, top to bottom. It's a gauntlet every single game you play, and UCF is one of the great examples of that, because you guys are worried about getting rebounds, and at the end of the day, you're still 8-2 and killing it, but it's not good enough because the Big 12 is so tough.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Kansas, they got the interesting thing about Kansas, and here's a surprise about Kansas, is the 2 games that they lost are fairly recent, right? So they lost 2 games in a row, and sometimes teams have off like games or spurts or whatever, right? So they lost against Creighton 76-63, and they lost to Missouri 76-67. They then came back and beat NC State, right? So I think the thing about Kansas that's going to be interesting, they play West Virginia, and West Virginia is a lot better team. After they lost Coach Huggins, they kind of went into a shell and kind of had to rebrand their identity, right? Because they'd been Coach Huggy Bear's team for a really, really long time and played a certain brand of basketball, tough defense, press style of basketball. And then when he left, then they had to find another identity. So they started to put it together this year. I think Kansas, Kansas is going to be a tough, West Virginia is going to be a tough game. Then they play us. We beat them last year at home at our house, and we play home and away with them this year. So we get to play them at home at their field house, which is exciting. And then they come to our place and play. I will say this about, UCF's experience in the Big 12 conference. When it comes to environments, UCF has a pretty good environment, right? It's got a fairly large gymnasium or arena, right? And it's pretty packed for a Big 12 season, right? And you look around and you listen to everybody else, and you see all the different arenas around the league, and they're all packed too. Kansas, it's going to be interesting how Kansas reacts to UCF, because if they're vulnerable, UCF can win a lot of these games because we've got scoring and we didn't have the scoring last year. As but there's not a lot of holes in the Big 12, right? We'll see more as it kind of shakes out, but there's going to be teams that are going to be 500 and you're going to kind of look at them and then most of the country is going to be like, oh, they're a 500 team. Well, it's a 500 team in conference in the Big 12 conference. So no matter what the SEC is doing this year, the Big 12 is still the best hoops conference. And, you may get 6 or 7 teams in the tournament. I would have said 8 at the beginning of the season, but you might get 6 or 7 teams in the postseason this year.
Yeah, it's always one of those things where I always think we'll get 7 or 8, and that was even when it was just 10 teams not too long ago. So I also just think the Big 12 should always get at least half the teams in. It should be 8 minimum, to be honest, because sometimes a team has a record of 17 and 13, but 13 of those losses are just all in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems insane of, okay, this conference is that tough because they've got 2 losses against Iowa State. Well, okay, Iowa State's top 5 in the country. It's 2 losses to KU, 2 losses to, maybe a split with UCF, split with Texas Tech, and oh my gosh, you beat Texas Tech, right? Like that was one of the great wins. So
well, you've got Houston. I mean, think about it though. The bottom of the league right now, you've got Houston and Arizona that were 2 preseason top 10 teams. You know what I mean? So it's not like you've got a lack of talent. And not every season goes the way that you expect it to, but even Cincinnati right now is ranked number 19. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a ton of really, really, really good basketball teams, and there isn't a whole lot of separation amongst the top. And we'll see who's better than who when we get into conference. But I think you've got a solid, you've got a solid grouping that's going to start showing the top tier, middle tier, and then low tier as the season progresses. But I mean, Colorado 8-2, Baylor's 7-3, Oklahoma State 7-3, hasn't really played a lot of people. Houston's 7-3. So we're talking about Houston as if they've fallen off a cliff, but they're still 7-3, right? Not what we're expecting from Houston, right? But still a 7-3 team. So their losses was to number 23 San Diego State, who is perennially in the postseason, right? They beat Notre Dame. Alabama beat them 85-80. So, and it's not like, and then Auburn, who's number 2 in the country, beat them 74-69. So it's not like Houston's a bad team. They're still ranked number 15 in the country. And this is who you have to play I mean, the teams that are beating them, the number 2 team, the number 6 team. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's just every single night you're playing somebody, you're like, crap, we're playing them. Like I had a good chance to look at the whole Big 12 schedule for Oklahoma State, and I'm still like, okay, I mean we've got there's some teams here we can beat. It's possible, but it just is not.
There are no nights off.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the possible wins is like, okay, Utah and Colorado, and I'm sprinkling those in between games against at West Virginia and K-State and BYU, and I just talked about Colorado, like that's a good, maybe we could beat them. They beat the reigning back-to-back reigning national champion in UConn. So like, okay, and then I'm like, okay, well at least we play Utah twice this year. Maybe that would be because that's really how it is at the end of the day. So it's quite fascinating, I will say, and to see how the Big 12 will go this season too. Do you still think? Do you think that in the day just KU wins the whole thing though, or you think?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with
tough.
you. It's. I think you separate the wheat from the chaff kind of at the top, about midway through the conference season, right? And that'll give you a good indication of who's going to be there at the end. But even then, you've got a surprise team every year, and look at BYU last year. They were a surprise team last year, right? So you've got plenty of good basketball brands that are playing good basketball right now that it's really going to be tough to see who's going to be dominant and towards the end. Kansas is always going to get a bump because they're Kansas, right? That's just how it is. They're a great basketball brand, blue blood. Houston's starting to get some of that again. They really weren't great since Phi Jamma Slamma, and they've kind of turned that program around and made it a focus. Coach Sampson has done a great job there. He's passionate. He strips for the refs every week when he's on the sidelines, just getting mad, throwing clothes on the ground, and by the end of it, he's down in his skivvies. But his game, they win games. He motivates his team, and they're a solid basketball program that's really fundamentally sound. That's the thing about Sampson. So when you're watching these basketball games, it's not like one team happens to have like better athletes than everybody else. You mentioned UCF earlier. The roster is chock full of current 5-stars or most recent 5-stars and or 4-stars that have done really well where they were at and come to UCF. So there's no nights off. There's no nights off in Big 12 basketball. So if you ask me to try to predict who is going to dominate or be there at the end, anybody who tells you that they know or is even giving you an educated guess, they're lying to you, because there's no way. Anything can happen. And that's what's so great about Big 12 basketball, is because it's still interesting midway through the season or towards the end of the season, right? Because you can still make it to the conference tournament if you're just either at 500 or just above 500. That's why the out of conference, it's so important to lose the fewest number of games as possible. Because if you're one of those bubble teams, you want to make sure that's the case. You got Colorado, let's say they go 500 or just above 500. Guess what? You point back to UConn, right? There's quad one teams, quad one wins. It's like we should have beat LSU. We ended up losing in triple overtime or whatever it was. But those quad one wins, you get opportunities at them for them with the Big 12 night in and night out. And because all of the Big 12 teams do well and play competitively in quad one games outside of conference, then that allows you to get your RPI up and allows those Big 12 teams to really basically play quad one, quad two games the entire season. And that's why they end up getting so many people in the tournament. And it's good basketball. It's fundamental basketball. You get different styles of basketball every team that you play. Johnny Dawkins was talking about that. We're like, why are you playing? He was asked, why are you playing all of these different random teams? It's because they may be in smaller conferences, but they're at the top of their league and they play a specific brand of basketball that one of the Big 12 teams play. And because of that, you've got really good coaching, you've got real different styles, and it gets your team ready for that. And it's a huge differentiator.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm sorry, I kind of wax poetic on it, but for me, I'm excited about the Big 12. Like it made basketball season fun again, because when you're in a G5 league or a one bid or two bid league, unless you're going undefeated, if you lose 2 games or 3 games, your season's done. It's cooked, right? Not the Big 12.
No.
And it's really good basketball. You've got really good talent, really good coaches, and a lot of strategy that goes into the basketball games.
Yeah, one of the things I haven't talked about too much, just period here in any podcast, is that I am actually coaching basketball this year, granted middle school basketball, so I'm not trying to compare it to anything of Big 12 basketball to that. But
you're not going to pull a Sampson. You might get arrested if you pull that at.
If I did that in middle school, I would get arrested for sure. I don't know how the man sweats so much and hasn't tried to figure out just an undershirt or multiple undershirts at this point. But I digress. The most fun of watching Big 12 basketball is that it's super competitive and it's super intense defense. And that is completely opposite, of course, middle school basketball, but also opposite the NBA most nights, right? Like you're running an offense. There's a system. You can tell, oh man, tonight I'm watching Press Virginia, which isn't really that much there anymore because Huggies is not there. Bob Huggins is not there anymore. But it is
Huggins. I hadn't heard that one before.
It is true that there's just a different style of basketball, like I think in the Big 12. Like I'm excited to play Utah this year. purely just because I don't know what it'll look like. Like, it'll be fun, but it'll also be Utah's style of basketball. Like, Oklahoma State's style of basketball this year is much different than last year, much more intense, pressing a lot more, really just trying to, press off of a make and get back on defense, running a lot more zone than we had seen previously as well too. And then they'll switch to man out of nowhere, and it's just definitely. I know I'm using very common terms and very easy things, but like the Big 12 doesn't do anything that is insane and hard to watch and like six different back cuts and screens or whatever to get a guy open shooting a three for the third time in a row that possession. Instead, it's just much more like a fluid basketball game, but it can be very, very physical or not night to night. And it's just college basketball to me is just that much more fun to watch because you don't know what you're going to get. And that speaks really well to the Big 12 as a whole, too. I mean, you've got, of course, you've got an institution like KU and Houston for the past several years now, and Arizona, and okay, all right, Baylor, Scott Drew, and just all these different institutions that are just in the Big 12. And then, of course, you've got the teams that'll just kind of rise up and may peak one year, may not. And Colorado, played deep into the tournament last year. This year, they look pretty darn good so far. We've got an Oklahoma State team that's trying to rebuild here, so they're not going to be taking any nights off whatsoever, especially with the new head coach. And yeah, I'm excited always excited for Big 12 basketball. Arizona State's no slouch, so I also want to throw them in there. Of course, champion football, but heck, basketball is a sport I think that they're probably known the best for of recent memory of any of the three sports. Maybe not baseball. I'm including baseball as kind of the third, but James Harden went to Arizona State. Like, there's just a legacy everywhere you look around. Utah has had a number 1 overall pick in Andrew Bogut not too long. I mean, not forever ago, I guess you say, like this century at least. So there's just all these guys all over in each different program. Even if you're like, oh, Utah basketball, how good could they be?
You're watching
You just always
lottery
have it.
picks. You're
Yeah.
watching lottery picks every night too, right? So it's like we had one last year. You know what I mean? It's the top level talent, top level coaching, good strategy, and it's not gimmick basketball. Teams can't just get away with being good at one particular thing, right? So like you've got to have a pick and roll. You've got to have the ability to shoot a three. You've got to have the ability. Your guys have to be moving around and slashing and doing all the things that they need to do. Dribble, there's just so many different things that you have to be good at. And because the teams all play different styles, you can't just rely on your one style to be able to win games. And if you're watching the game within the game for Big 12 basketball, I challenge you to look at other conferences and see that level of play and the level of strategy anywhere else in the country. I really do, night in and night out. We also have to, continue our championship pedigree as far as being contending or having Big 12 teams contending for the national championship. That needs to continue happening. We need to have, deeper runs into the tournament. But ultimately, if you're talking about quality basketball, I played something I didn't talk about on here. I played semi-pro basketball in Europe when I was 15 years old. So I was a pretty good basketball player, and I know a little bit about hoops. And I can tell you the quality, you're not out athleting anybody in the Big 12. There's good athletes everywhere you look. There's good coaching everywhere you look. It's solid basketball, strategic basketball, and it's a pleasure to watch.
It truly is. I don't know. I almost want to ask you one more Big 12 basketball related question here. I guess is there a team that maybe besides Arizona that you think is going to surprise you in a bad way? Because Arizona right now 5-5, I think they'll rebound. They will win games here. They are too well coached, and yeah, basketball, yeah. But I'm back here if I can still remember. No, wrong button. Anyways, I will figure out what that is in a second. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's always gonna be one Big 12 team that lets everyone else down. Like Baylor's 7-3, but have they really played anyone? Of course, Houston's also 7-3 here, and We just spent a long time talking about how good Houston is. K-State's got a bunch of players from the portal. I see our Bob Trollsby, fellow Big 12 Huddle companion here, tweeting out about them and how, it doesn't look great for K-State and the players and, all the type of stuff. And, the 9 hours ago, 247 Sports had 5 reasons why Kansas State basketball has struggled. And Coleman Hawkins calls out the fan base for criticism and stuff like that. So, what maybe it's K-State that lets us down. I don't know.
I don't know. They haven't really played anybody except for LSU, which they lost to, right? And Iowa, or not Iowa. No, LSU and GW, maybe George Washington. So they played St. John's, lost to them. They did beat GW. I don't know how good they are this year. Yeah, they're 4-2, so they're not great. But yeah, I mean, I think K-State is going to struggle this year by all accounts. That's what they've showed us. I think Arizona, like I said, is struggling, and we were all expecting them to have a solid team this year. I don't know who's going to disappoint us other than who's already disappointed us, right? Oklahoma State, I don't know what we've got out of Oklahoma State yet. You guys haven't played anybody. So, they could be a surprise. They could not be a surprise. And they're going through full rebuild. So, you expect them to kind of be the lower third of the league when it comes to that. That's a hard question because I really think that if you're should a 7-3 Houston team, it currently listed, third from the bottom in the conference, but realistically, those 3 losses were to big teams and still ranked number 15 in the country, right? So you can't just look at the standings and say, hey, we're going to pick these teams. I don't know. I think West Virginia could go either way. Cincinnati has surprised me in a good way. I'd love to see how they do this year. And everybody else's, you can't really tell much from their out-of-conference play because they're all pretty much the same. And there's been a few teams here and there that they play, but even the losses that they've had, they're against highly ranked teams, and they've been competitive losses. I hate to say that, I'm beginning to start to sound like SEC football fans here with the strength of schedule and the quality losses and all that stuff, but when we look at it, there's not a whole lot of separation for us to pick from right now to really see it.
Yeah, there's really not. And I'm more excited for the Big 12 basketball season than I am actually like the college basketball season as a whole. Like, honestly, I don't know how many other college basketball games and stuff I'll watch outside of the Big 12 here. Maybe a UCLA game with family because their half family went to Oklahoma State or other Big 12 schools and the other half went to UCLA. But besides that, I'm just so hyped up for Big 12 basketball as a whole. Excited for this season here. That's going to come up before too long, of course. But yeah, here.
Yeah, we got our last game this weekend before we kick off conference play. So excited about that. And this is year 2 for us, and it'll be interesting to see how this UCF team does this year. I mean, we kick off with a Texas Tech team that I think is 8-2 as well, right? So that's game number 1 is an 8-2 basketball team. That's 7-0 at home, right? I mean, there's not very many conferences that can say that.
Not at all. So only time will tell here if the Big 12 lives up to what both you and I think they will play like at the end of the day.
I will tell you, if Arizona has struggled this much, I mean, as far as the disappointment is concerned, I think it's going to be tough sledding for Arizona in the Big 12. So they may be my biggest disappointment of the year.
Really? Yeah. Yeah, I mean they're 500. They're Arizona. That's kind of all we need to say, right? Like I always think
Arizona's they played against UCLA competitively. UCLA is ranked number 18. They lost 57-54. They beat Southern Utah 102-66. That's interesting. Lost to number 14 Oklahoma 82-77. Oklahoma all of a sudden is number 14. Like, where's this Oklahoma basketball team been? Lost to West Virginia, which is interesting, 83-76. So again, Duke 69-55. Don't blame them. That's number 5 Duke. Lost to Wisconsin 103-88, which is kind of crazy. But this team can score points. They lost to number 6 Clemson 77-72. So in the NCAA tournament last year, and this team brought back a lot of people, right? So when I'm looking at this, they should be better. They've lost some games, but they haven't lost against bad competition. So they're better than what their record shows, but they could be the disappointment for me this year, considering what our preseason expectations were. That's not fair to Arizona, but that's the reality of the game.
Yeah, very, very well said here. I completely agree. With that here, Roger, do you have any other shout outs here you want to have for the Big 12 or anything else here before we hit the holidays and have, of course, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone next week, as we will not be back for our regular schedule because we normally record these on Wednesday nights, which is Christmas next week. So there'll be another video instead here. Make sure to be subscribed and check all those below, and follow at the CGA Tour on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow at Night Bengal, wherever you follow him at, but basically X here. And then, of course, the Night at Once podcast is the UCF podcast for the Big 12 Huddle. But anything else you want to shout out here before we kind of end this one out?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to everybody that watches the channel. It's interesting. We see some of our videos are getting 2,000 views, and some of them are not. But either way, if you're consistent and you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're watching us, thank you. If you think we suck, thank you for watching us. Tell us as well. The comments section, make sure that you're communicating with us because we want to keep getting better. Shout out to all the families out there. I'm hoping most of you get to spend and make great memories with your families. Some of us are dealing with people that we lost this year. So shout out to all of those people too. We've got a lot to look forward to with Big 12 basketball. I'm thankful that we're part of the conference. And, for me, just a personal wish to everyone that's out there. The holidays are tough for a lot of people. There's a lot of things that happen during the holidays that are not so fun. So to all those people that are struggling out there, make sure you lean on those that you need to get through it. So I know that's kind of like a personal kind of thing, but there's a lot of people out there that holidays aren't so happy. So if you are a person out there that can help someone, help someone. If you're a person that needs help, find someone. And, go Knights and charge on, man.
Well, I want to echo all of that. Holidays used to not be the happiest time of year for me, and still is a very different time, of course, now, and a new kind of life here is turning over a leaf since 2020. But I will say the holidays are something I always look forward to. It's been great to enjoy that with my family this year, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone. Thanks so much for listening, following, and like Night Bengal said, if we're not doing a great job here and you're listening this far into the podcast, please let us know. Had somebody let me know that they're a coach and I have no idea what I'm talking about in my podcast earlier this week. But I just want to ask, what do I not know? Because I don't know. What are you coaching? I'm always curious. So with all that being said here, charge on, go Pokes, and we'll catch you guys again in 2025.